and we're now going to reflect on the sad news overnight about the passing at the age of 47 of Matt Beard, the former Liverpool women's football manager, who was a major figure in the women's game. And Henry, you've been having a look through some of the statements various clubs have released and the WSL about this sad news.
Yes, I mean, football is mourning the loss of, well, one of the legends of management in the women's game. And just looking at his career, I mean, it was a remarkable career. Millwall Lionesses, promotion. Chelsea got into the cup final. Liverpool, see those back-to-back title wins in 2013 and 2014. They went over to the United States. Boston Breakers, back here, West Ham, Bristol City, back to Liverpool, won the women's championship title in 2022, and then was at Burnley before leaving last month. And just looking at some of the statements, everyone talking very much about his impact on women's football and his legacy to the growing game, but also to his character as well. And I'll just pick out two, if I may, quickly, briefly. Richard Bevan, the Chief Executive of the League Managers Association, he mentions Matt Beard's sense of humour and big personality was matched by his empathy and kindness. Emma Hayes, he was always smiling, always coaching from the touchline. He was someone who gave a huge deal to the game and to his players. He was one of a kind, and his loss will be felt by all. He's a very kind, compassionate, caring man. And in all this, we obviously think of his wife and two children and his stepson, and our thoughts are with them.
I don't know if you ever saw it, but from memory, he figured quite heavily in the West Ham women documentary. It was about 3 or 4 episodes, and you get a sense of what a big figure he was in football from that. Compassionate with his players, but with an edge, and totally invested in the women's game.
I think Julie Flaherty, who obviously played under him, she has put out a very emotional statement on what he meant to her and her career.
We're joined now by Joe Shannon, who's talkSPORT's women's football reporter. Morning, Joe.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Henry.
Morning.
Joe, I don't know where to start with this, but it's obviously news that has devastated the game.
It is desperately shocking, desperately sad. And first and foremost, I think, you're absolutely right to point out that this is a human tragedy, first of all. 47 years of age, it's no age at all. And this is somebody who was a husband, a friend, and a father. And I think that really gives you all the perspective that you need on it. A tremendously successful football manager, of course, an influential figure, somebody who commanded the respect of everybody in the game, universal respect of everybody in the game. And you've seen that with the tributes that have been pouring in, this wealth and breadth of tributes from across football for Matt Beard. And fundamentally, I come back to it again. It's just so particularly sad for his family. I think the whole of football is really shocked by this news.
Matt, can you give us an idea what he was like to deal with as a journalist? We get very used to dealing with managers in the male game. Was it a different sort of manager in the female game?
Well, I think he was always courteous and respectful, first of all. I think one of the things that has been mentioned, and one of the fun things about him, was that he would, if he heard a question from you that he felt was perhaps a little unfair or a little misjudged, then he would come back at you with a robust answer. But it was always done in a respectful, in a nice way. So he was a character, certainly, and you saw that on the touchline with his cajoling of his players and the energy that he provided. But everything was done in the right way, in the proper way, with a touch of kindness. He was a very gentle person and a nice person to speak to. And as I say, a lot of the tributes that have come in, you speak about Matt Beard's legacy in the game, what he's achieved, and he achieved a heck of a lot, and a heck of a lot that spanned well over a decade. When you look at when he won the WSL twice with Liverpool, still very much a relevant figure in the game, right up until now, and but what players say, speaking to players, speaking to people in the women's game, universally, is the respect for Matt Beard as a person. And again, as a journalist, our exchanges were always very cordial. And I think for many of the journalists who knew Matt better than I did, all the journalists who knew Matt better than I did, there would have been exactly the same level of mutual respect, and the way that he conducted himself was professional and proper, and it's just a tremendously sad loss.
You talk about his people skills, and everyone's been mentioning those this morning, which is obviously such a huge part, particularly of modern management. But what was he like as a sort of tactician, setting up his team?
Well, he was very flexible, and I think he got the best out of all the players that he had at his disposal. You look at the Liverpool team that he managed, and players like Olivia Smith, who is now at Arsenal, and this summer became the world's first £1 million female footballer. She speaks about Matt Beard in another emotive tribute, and says, I can't remember the exact words, but she says, I wouldn't have been where I am today without you. So Matt Beard was somebody who was a great player manager, a great developer of players. He came in at different jobs, and he had a succession of different jobs, of course, in this country, but he worked successfully in the United States, at Boston as well. He was somebody who could improve players, and he was a manager who tactically was flexible. I think we saw that throughout his time at Liverpool in the two spells in particular. Took Liverpool, of course, back into the WSL, and there was always a versatility about that Liverpool team. He could mix it up depending on who they were coming up against, whether it was one of the so-called big guns, or whether it was a team that they would expect to beat. But a game against a Matt Beard team was a difficult game, whoever you were in the WSL. And there were some tremendously entertaining matches, particularly for Liverpool at home in that first season back in the WSL, where they surprised a few people. I don't think many had been expecting Liverpool to do as well as they ended up doing in that first season back in particular. So he was adaptable, he was dependable, he brought players on, he improved players, and he helped elevate them to new heights. And of course, as we know in football, that's a skill that is about technicals and ability, but it's also about player management, being a good human, being a good person, and that's what he was.
Liverpool's game at Aston Villa today in the Women's Super League has actually been postponed to mark the passing of Matt Beard. But Joe, you will be at Man United v Arsenal. It will be an emotional day for all the women involved in the Women's Super League. How are you going to approach that game?
Well, it of course takes a completely different slant and feel, doesn't it now, Sean? I mean, it was a game that, people up until yesterday, were thoroughly looking forward to in the context of it being an early season top of the table clash. These are two teams that have started well, and I'm sure will feel, Manchester United and Arsenal, that they can compete with Chelsea for the Women's Super League title. Of course, what has happened over the last 24 hours is a great reminder of, as is always the case when such things happen, the real importance of things in life. And there'll be many players on the field, among the substitutes, coaches, staff on the bench who had a connection with Matt Beard, who knew Matt Beard, who worked with him, who played under him. So the atmosphere will be strange. Of course it will. It's never nice for anybody in this sort of situation, and it, I'm sure, is always difficult for players and coaches to keep attention focused fully on the game. But no doubt the tributes will be poignant. They will be moving. and hopefully on the field, the players can produce something of a footballing tribute. But you look, no question that what has happened has overshadowed all of the fixtures this weekend in the Women's Super League, and rightly so.
Joe Shannon, thank you for your time on what is a very sad day for not just women's football, but football in general.
Yeah, and obviously thoughts with family, with wife, two children, stepson. I think he's a coach at Chelsea. So absolutely, but his legacy is there in all of the statements and the tributes that former players of his have issued, of talking about him as an incredible coach, but also most importantly as an amazing man, full of compassion.